What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here with Judd Zulgad on Wednesday at Vikings headquarters. And Judd, the Vikings beginning preparations today for the Washington Redskins in an interesting situation continuing to play out with Jerome Simpson, who wakes up on Sunday morning with numbness and weakness in one of his feet. He can't push off. He tries to go through the whole game. He's playing into the second half, but knows that he's never completely right. They put him through tests on Monday, further tests on Tuesday. It sounds as though the plan is to go the non-surgical route, which is always the first thing you do.
Right.
But color me a little bit skeptical on the idea that this guy, if he couldn't feel one of his feet throughout that game, unless it's just a total freak thing where you sleep on it wrong and it doesn't come up quite right,
Sure.
This is something where they're going to try to put on an optimistic face and let him play through it. And Jerome Simpson has a lot of reasons to play through it as well.
He does contractually. If he plays per game, he gets so much. But here's my question. How many times is this just a freak thing? I mean, it might be a freak injury, but how often do we see it? A guy tries to play through something like this, play through it?
Sure.
Best case scenario, it's going to impact him in a negative way for a few games. Worst case, it negatively impacts him for a game or two, and they finally say, we're going to have surgery. You know what's got to be really frustrating? This guy sits out the first 3 games, right? And everyone's saying, including the Vikings, just hold on. Our vertical threat is right around the corner. After 3 games, Jerome Simpson's going to play. He plays really 1 game against Detroit, gets 2 pass interference penalties that he draws, makes 1 nice deep catch, and then, in what should have been his home debut, targeted 3 times, no passes caught. This is going to call for other guys to definitely step up, though. And here's my question, though. All right, in a week or two, are the Vikings going to be exactly back to where they started, which is, and they're still 4-1, they still been playing well, but no vertical threat.
Well, and that's just it. They did, I would say this for Michael Jenkins and Devin Aromashodu, when they were asked to make plays in that game, they made plays. But these are still not vertical speed threat type of plays. They did run 1 vertical route with Percy Harvin. I think we'll continue to see more of that because they want those corners to be able to back off. But all of Jenkins' catches were a matter of him settling in the zone. Devin Aromashodu's 1 long catch was a blown coverage all the way at the sideline.
Right.
That's what those guys are going to be able to do. They've got to make the plays when called upon, but in that game they were clearly focusing upon, let's try to exploit the Titans in the intermediate passing game. When you get into some of these games, you need to be able to stretch the football field.
Yep.
Without Jerome Simpson, they still don't have a guy who can do it.
And the Titans are the Titans. The Titans are not very good. The Vikings are going to face better teams than the Titans in the coming weeks. Here's a question, too. You're 4-1 now. I mean, this is a rebuilding team. This is a team that we knew, Rick Spielman, during the offseason, was basically not going to go out and get any veteran players. They weren't going to make any trades for veterans. Do you have to, at some point in time, if Jerome Simpson, let's say he's lost for an extended period, look at either making a trade? And remember, the trade deadline has now been moved to the Tuesday after Week 8 as opposed to the Tuesday after Week 6. Do you look at that? Do you look at the free agent route? Do you look at having to go out and get another receiver if Simpson is lost for a long period of time? Based on the fact that you're 4-1. You might actually be a pretty good team. I'm shocked, but you might be a good team.
I think you go out and you look at all the options available to you, but I think that they would be really reluctant to bring in a veteran guy who potentially, especially at the receiver position. As we know, there are a lot of personalities at the receiver position. There's not a lot of guys who are established players and good players who are going to come in and assimilate and just sort of fade into the background of a team.
Right.
They're going to be guys who are going to change some things in terms of the personality of that group, and so I think they'd be reluctant on that standpoint. If you're talking about trading for a younger player, a vertical receiver from another team, I think absolutely that's something they're looking into because that's something they're going to try to do anyway. They made a strong push for Pierre Garçon in the offseason. They wanted to bring that guy in.
Right.
They settled for doing a heavy background check on Jerome Simpson. They were comfortable with the off-the-field things with him. If you had the opportunity to go out and get somebody, sure, you'd consider that, but what's the price tag going to be? Especially because there's probably going to be, if somebody like that's available, you're talking about a few teams that are going to be interested in that guy. I still think that they would stand pat. They're carrying 6 receivers right now. Let's also not forget that. That's more than most teams in the NFL are carrying.
But are they carrying 6? That's the question.
Well, no, of course not. But because you've got guys like Aromashodu and Jenkins, who you knew were going to be stopgaps for you. They brought those guys back, and Michael Jenkins ends up having to take a pay cut to stay with the team. They bring back Devin Aromashodu because they couldn't go out and get that vertical receiver now. I think that as you look at next year's draft, and granted we're a long way away from that, but people like to look ahead. I think the receiver is certainly one of the 3 positions you look at and say that's probably going to be a target for the Vikings very high in the draft. It's just difficult to make a move that's going to yield a sea change for you during the season, especially in the next 3 weeks. How far would they have to fall in the next couple of weeks where they'd be desperate enough to go out and change what they do offensively?
Well, and also keep in mind too, what is the one person wide receiver wise that these guys, right or wrong, are going to remember is the attempt to bring in Randy Moss when the Vincent Jackson trade fell through in 2010.
Another guy they tried to go
but the problem there too is, and people will argue that the locker room dynamic is not important. I'm telling you, Leslie Frazier and Rick Spielman have built up a pretty good locker room here. You do not want to alter that locker room right now. I mean, Compared to last year, this locker room is great. And what did you do? You peeled away a few bad characters. Cedric Griffin, who you will see on Sunday in Washington.
You'll probably see him going like this and waving.
He won't wave at you.
Vertical.
Well, he might use his hand to indicate something to you.
They made a play. We didn't. Good for them.
It will not be a wave. But my point is, they altered that locker room just enough to get the right guys, and it's a good locker room right now. That's another thing with this. This is a young team. You have to be, I'll say this, careful about who you bring in, what type of changes you make now, because these guys get along. And look at it. I mean, you are looking at a very young football team that is overachieving right now. It would not take a lot to screw up the chemistry, even by accident.
Madu Williams is also in that secondary.
He's starting, right?
Dejan Gomes had been starting the first 3 games. The guy who blew up Peterson's knee. Yeah, I mean, you've got both those guys, though, who are at least part of the secondary back there. 2 guys the Vikings cut because, frankly, they didn't have a whole lot left.
Hey, listen, Madu Williams had a great training camp until he injured his neck and then had no interest in playing football.
And then he was still here another 4 years.
But he didn't want to play football anymore. That neck injury.
It's kind of an important part.
That guy, yeah, well.
Being willing to go in and tackle.
Hey, Bernard Berrien signed a huge contract here as a free agent. Never wanted to play football a day in his life.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Redskins. They do some unique things offensively with Robert Griffin III. They run speed option. They run triple option. You're going to see something that looks probably more like Oregon's offense than it looks like an NFL offense.
Yep.
And that makes gap integrity really important here. I'm interested to see how guys like Jasper Brinkley, who's a downhill player, even Aaron Henderson, I think, to an extent, is a guy who's at his best when he's going downhill. Mm-hmm. Those guys now have to be really disciplined and go side to side in this game and be able to defend the option. That's going to be a unique challenge and something unlike anything they've faced at this point.
It'll be good, too, because that's the one thing. How many times last year, as the Vikings struggled on defense under Fred Puckett, do we hear that their gap discipline was awful? They made so many mistakes.
They've been better this year.
Yes, they have been, but this will be the best test on that. However, I'll say this. We're sitting here on Wednesday. Robert Griffin III is supposed to go through practice today, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm not buying the fact he's playing still. I mean, I would not assume this guy's
going to play. Well, either way, you were going to say that he's going through practice. Is that your point?
No, here's what I love. Mike Shanahan, give me a break. The Redskins announced that Robert Griffin, hold on a second. The Redskins announced that Robert Griffin III is going to go through practice on Wednesday with no contact. Mm-hmm. When's the last time a starting quarterback in the National Football League got hit at Wednesday practice? What I'm saying is the Redskins are blowing a bunch of BS up our you-know-whats. When he starts on Sunday, I'll believe it.
I don't think there's a whole lot of question that he starts. Well, I mean, either way,
he's got to be clear.
He's going to be listed as questionable on the injury report. I said that on Sunday night on Sports Wrap because that's the obvious thing to do. Make them at least prepare as well for the idea they're not going to have to do it. But the thing is, if you're the Vikings, you have no choice. You have to prepare for Griffin. You have to prepare for the speed option. And if you don't prepare for Kirk Cousins back there, I don't think that's the worst.
I agree with you. I think the Redskins are getting the Vikings to prepare for a guy who I think there's a good chance won't play on Sunday. I think it's a bunch of BS.
Well, this will be interesting.
You got to clear this guy. An independent doctor is to clear him. This is typical Mike Shanahan. It's going to be my way. I'm going to do it. Give me a break.
Did you actually think that I didn't think he took that bad of a shot in that game. I mean, it didn't look like it felt good.
You know what? I told you during the game when you played that for me on your computer, I said it reminded me of the shot that Drew Bledsoe took that opened the door for Tom Brady because he's diving. You know what? I think it was hard to see the exact nature of the shot because he's diving out and there's guys around him.
Going back to Washington where they've won 2 games on the road the past couple of seasons.
Don't want to talk about that.
It's a totally different scenario right now. When you consider the first one was Leslie Frazier as interim coach in that disastrous 2010 season.
McNabb.
And last year was the only, against McNabb, where McNabb would have won the game had he been able to not underthrow somebody by 20 yards down the field.
And isn't it then that we said, I would never take down the McNabb on my team?
I thought that he was absolutely finished to that point. Mike Shanahan also looked at that and said, this guy's probably done.
You were right. Adrian Peterson also back in Washington where he blew out his knee.
And Christian Ponder got knocked out of that game as well. It sounds like though Ponder is okay. Peterson didn't practice today. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of talk about the fact that he might miss Sunday's game. But certainly he felt out of whack in that past game. If that's Adrian Peterson out of whack, 17 carries for 88 yards, Vikings probably can live with it.
Real quick, we are not deeming this a high ankle sprain, correct?
No.
This is just an ankle sprain.
It's been called a mild ankle sprain.
Big difference.
Missed 3 games last year, though, with the high ankle sprain. He's Judd. I'm Tom. Full Vikings coverage at 1500 ESPN.com. We'll see you.